should also be live streamed on Facebook. It should also be live streamed on Facebook and on the UBI Lab Wales page. Please feel free to engage in the chat, post your comments and ask your questions, and we'll be selecting some for the Q&A section at the end of the evening. The format of the evening is as planned. I'll introduce our guests and ask them a few questions to get them warmed up. Before moving on to the Q&A section at around 7:30 p.m. And then we'll leave around 10 minutes at the end for some final remarks. As usual, enormous thanks to the UBI Lab Network team who'll be in the chat to answer any technical questions and post links as they come up. The volunteer-led labs would not be able to do what we do without them. So if anyone is feeling generous or able to support them, please do. The links to do this will also be put in the chat box. The lab networks are a campaign group calling for trials of UBI so that we can gather evidence to support our position that it should be put in place nationwide, countrywide, and worldwide. And for anyone who wants to get involved in helping to make UBI a reality, please see the variety of labs available, both the special interest groups such as the Women's Lab, Arts, LGBTQ and Disability, to name but a few, and also the geographical labs, which are worldwide, but focusing on Wales. There's the Caerphilly Lab, the main Wales Lab, Cardiff, Swansea, RCT, Newport, Gwynedd, and our newest member, the Lab at Wrexham. If you live elsewhere in Wales and are interested in founding a lab, then please get in touch. And for anyone tweeting or discussing this event on Twitter or any other social media platforms, please use the hashtag UBI Caerphilly. UBI Lab Caerphilly are proud to be hosting the first UBI Lab event in Wales since the commitment made by First Minister Mark Drakeford to hold a pilot for UBI in Wales. We like to think that the UBI Lab Wales's Pledge campaign that ran before the recent Senedd elections and succeeded in getting commitments from half of those elected to the Senedd played no small part in this commitment. And we're now hoping to build on this by ensuring that the pilot has the best chance of showing off UBI to its full potential. It's currently envisaged as a pilot limited to care leavers, but we believe that this should be extended. And we currently have a Senedd petition running, which requests that a Care Leavers Plus pilot be considered. But we'll be getting into this with our guests shortly. The petition is in a chat box, and it can be signed by anyone. So please add your support and signature. For those of you who are new to the concept of universal basic income, in its simplest form, it is unconditional, regular payments to all people, regardless of their circumstances. There is much difference of opinion about what the amount of these payments should be and how they should be funded, but the theory is that it should be enough to meet people's basic needs. So universal to everyone, unconditionally, basic, enough to meet their basic needs, income on a regular basis, e.g. weekly or monthly. For further information, I refer you to the frequently asked questions link on the UBI Lab Network website, and this should have been sent out with the event reminders as well. Okay. This evening, we are in conversation with some of the leading political figures for the Caerphilly region, and I'm therefore very excited to welcome our 4 guests so that we can talk about what a UBI might look like in this area. We have the leader of Caerphilly County Borough Council and leader of Labour councillors, Philippa Marsden, who represents the ward of Untitled. We also have the Senedd member for South Wales East region, Delyth Jewell. She's a spokesperson for climate change for Plaid Cymru. We also have the Senedd member for Merthyr Tydfil and Rhymney, Dawn Bowden, who represents Welsh Labour. She's also the Deputy Minister for Arts and Sports and is the Welsh Government Chief Whip. We also have the Member of Parliament for Caerphilly, Wayne David, also representing Welsh Labour. He is Shadow Minister of State for the Middle East and North Africa. Thank you for joining us. It's a real pleasure and an honour to have you here. So this is an informal conversation, and if people want to make a comment, please just let me know and I'll bring you in. Okay, if you could turn to Philippa first. Hi. Philippa.
Yep, thank you ever so much. Go on.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
No, and thank you. Go on.
We're asking, what could a universal basic income do for Caerphilly and the people living there?
I suppose, you know, looking at this, it's important, isn't it, that you just referenced that in terms of unconditional. And I think for me, it's about a basic right in terms of having a base income. standardised across, you know, regardless of your income. And I think they're the sort of things we need to unpick in terms of what people need in order to survive and to live. You know, as a trade unionist, I would absolutely advocate that we push, you know, for excellent rates of pay in the workplace and good terms and conditions, because those do help, obviously, lift people out of poverty and give them a sense of worth in their community. So it's understanding for me that actually this is something that we need to look at, you know, to absolutely find the evidence that gives us the pros and cons for this. What are the benefits? Does it lift people out of poverty? Does it give us what we need in society so that people are not struggling to make ends meet? Because I think that is what we don't want to see in our communities. You know, struggling to, you know, make ends meet is just not an easy place for people to be in, and that affects well-being, mental health, and all the other things that go with that. So it's really important that as a society we move where everyone is leveled up in that respect. So actually a standard and conditional payment to everyone, regardless of your income, could be a powerful tool to help lift people out of poverty. So I hope that helps.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Yeah. If we could turn to Wayne next. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, can I say that it's a pleasure to be part of a vitally important debate, because this issue needs to be discussed. There are varying views, let's be clear about it. But I think that it's very, very important to acknowledge that the Welsh Government is going to pursue a pilot project, and a lot of information will come from that. And the debate is very much on now, whether or not this concept should be examined, refined, and developed, and, if appropriate, implemented. And I'm very encouraged by that. I think there's a lot in favour of the concept of a universal basic income. It has been experimented with in different ways, and various projects have been tried in different parts of the world, and maybe we can talk about those later. But I think the basic idea, as Philippa has correctly said, of basically ensuring that, you know, the great mass of people, and we are talking in Caerphilly about an area which is quite a poor area, relatively speaking, having the ability to have the best chances in life without having the constant strain of the benefits, dilemmas which inevitably are there and being faced by people, especially now on a daily basis. But basically having that security of income at a basic level to ensure that they can have the wherewithal to look elsewhere for greater opportunities in life, whether it's jobs or whether it's future training or whatever. And I think that basic income gives people that sense of security and confidence to fulfill their full potential. And therefore, I think this is, as I say, a vitally important debate. And I think the concept really needs to be taken forward.
Yeah, thank you. Dawn, would you like to say some things about this?
Thank you. Well, can I say from the outset, I'm not speaking here on behalf of Welsh Government tonight. I mean, I am speaking in a personal capacity and in my capacity as the member of the Senedd for Merthyr Tydfil and Rhymney. But I do support the Welsh Government's position on this and the decision to take forward a pilot and to assess the outcome of a pilot, because I think that's going to be important. You know, we don't have an awful lot of evidence of the outcomes of where this has been trialled elsewhere in the world. So I do think that is an important aspect of this, that we do need to test it, trial it, and see what the impact of it is. But if I can just deal with the specific point that you raised, which is, you know, what would be the benefit to people in Caerphilly? Well, let me tell you, you know, I represent a part of Caerphilly County Borough, the Upper Rhymney Valley, which has probably some of the most deprived communities in Wales, if not in the UK. And so, you know, I see very much a situation where we have to get people into being significant contributors to the economy. So the way that people contribute to the economy is they spend money, and they're going to spend money if they've got money. Now, you know, I noticed, I don't know whether I'm sure everybody's been following the discussion and the debate that was in Parliament on the universal credit and the UK government's decision to withdraw the £20 uplift. I mean, absolutely scandalous decision given the situation that people are in. And when you're talking to people that were in receipt of that additional £20, what that meant to them in terms of their ability to be able to do things that they couldn't previously do, just £20. So, you know, if we were to put everybody on a level playing field and say that nobody receives an income that is less than what they need to live on, that has got to be to the benefit of the wider economy. And I happen to think that actually, if we had something like that, it would see an end to unscrupulous and exploitative employers, because they would no longer be able to get people to work for them. And we would see that that would start to push up wages, and in itself would encourage more people to try to get into employment that otherwise wouldn't if they were just relying on the benefits system.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn. Delyth, would you like to come in on this?
Yeah, sure, thank you. I think that one of the things that makes UBI such an exciting concept is that it would be something simultaneously foundational and radical. And what everyone else on the panel has already said, that this concept of something which is just the universality of it, that we wouldn't have the stigma that is so often associated with the benefit system. It shouldn't be there, but for so many different reasons, which I'm sure we can get into later on, it is there. So I think that bringing back, well, rather replacing a system that tries to take away people's dignity would be a fundamentally good thing. And I think in terms of what is being proposed at the moment in terms of this really exciting pilot that has been promised, there are lots of different ways in which this pilot could go. And if the pilot were to, for example, focus on one geographical area like Caerphilly, one of the benefits of doing that would be that we'd be able to see the benefits to the community as a whole, and how this could be transformative and transformational for a community. I think that there's some very tangible things that can be beneficial to the community as well. It could be really good for people's mental health and well-being, as has already been set out. As well as that, there are some parts of our economy that are not given the acknowledgement that they should be, that aren't valued in the way that they should be, like unpaid care work. And this would allow more people to be able to feel valued by society for that really vital work that they're doing. And it would encourage people, and this is something that Wayne had touched on, it would encourage people to free up more of their opportunity, I guess, to be more entrepreneurial, to look for more creative opportunities for what to do with their time, rather than being under this constant strain of having to go pay packet to pay packet, not always maybe doing something that would be utilizing all of their ability. I think that it would just allow people to flourish in so many different ways.
Oh, really great answers from all of you. Thank you so much. I would just like to remind the audience that this is being recorded, and that if they want to get involved, please do so in the chat. Get your questions in there, and we'll be selecting some for the question and answer section. And if you are tweeting or on other social medias, please use the hashtag UBI Caerphilly. Okay, let's move on. The Welsh Government, as we've discussed, has announced that there will be a basic income pilot during this Senedd term. It has been mooted that this will involve a single cohort of people, namely care leavers. We're asking, why not make the case for a deprived area of Caerphilly, for example, to be a test site? Dawn, you mentioned earlier about you're the member of the Senedd for Merthyr Tydfil in the Upper Rhymney Valley. You're actually my Senedd member, as I'm in New Tredegar.
Yeah, okay.
And New Tredegar is listed, or one area of New Tredegar is listed in the Welsh Index of Multiple Deprivation as 59 out of the 1,909 listed. Or, for example, there or anywhere else, could you make a case for using potentially a geographical region as opposed to a care on a personal level, we understand that you're not.
Yeah, no. I no. Don't worry about that. No, you know, you can make a case for running a pilot in a number of different ways. And there have been very many different pilots run in different ways across the world. The United States have run many actually, you know, and different types of pilots. So you can make the case. There's no doubt about that. Now, you know, Welsh Government has taken a cohort that we know are a particularly difficult cohort when they come out of care, to be able to find employment and to integrate into society in a way that generally the rest of us do, because they've been in a care system. They haven't been in a family setup in the traditional sense that we know it. They don't have the support around them that traditional families have, and so on. So, you know, it's a judgment call, isn't it? You know, there had to be a pilot, or it was decided there was going to be a pilot, and this was the judgment that this particular group, this cohort, would be a good cohort to test this out on and see what benefit it would have to them, you know, as they are coming out of care. That's not to say that you couldn't do different pilots and make the case for doing pilots, as Delyth has suggested, and the question suggests, in geographical areas. I suppose the only thing about that is that in one geographical area, you wouldn't necessarily get a sense of how that would impact across the country. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, with a cohort of just care leavers, you would get that across the country kind of sense of what it's doing, but it would give us it will give us a feel, I would hope, of how in all parts of Wales, giving some people access to a universal basic income would play out. But, you know, I think there is a case for doing either, but you have to make a choice. And in Welsh Government's case on this particular issue, this is the choice that's been made.
Thank you. Wayne, if we could turn to you. You recently invited Luke Hall to come and visit Bargoed.
Yes, and he's just been sacked. Maybe he was slightly too sympathetic to the needs of places like Bargoed. Makes you think. But to answer your question, really, I mean, the thing I would stress is that, you know, I think, broadly speaking, we share the same kind of politics in this discussion. But there's a heck of a lot of people who are fundamentally, ideologically and practically opposed to the whole idea of a basic income. And we've had discussions in House of Commons, and you know, most, but not all of the Conservatives are vehemently opposed. It has to be said, some Labour people are as well. I mean, Frank Field, who was a distinguished Labour member, chair of the Department of Work and Pensions Select Committee, was strongly against the concept even of a basic income. So I think that we have to recognize that we've got a long way to go in terms of winning the argument, in terms of implementing a policy which is not just radical, but it's almost revolutionary, because it is fundamentally different to anything that's been introduced since the creation of a welfare state in 1948. So I think we need to recognize just how revolutionary this is, and give credit, therefore, to the Welsh Government for at least dipping its finger into the water and having this first test. But I think we have to recognize that whatever the information that comes from this pilot, it will not be sufficient to make the case for it. And I personally think it'll require other pilots to be established as well. And they may be done with different groups of people, different cohorts, but also I think that they need to be done geographically. Wales is a diverse country. And yes, I would like to see one in Caerphilly, certainly. But I also think it's worth having a pilot scheme in future in a rural area, and maybe in North Wales as well. And then when the argument has been made and the information has been collated and the case has been made, Therefore, I think we're in a strong position to take things forward. And the next question will be, what is the best way to take it forward? But the thing I would stress at this stage in our discussion is that I think it's extremely important to collect as much information as possible to make our case as effective as we possibly can.
Thank you. Philippa, can I bring you in to maybe comment on that, leader of the Caerphilly Council?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what are our aims here? And our aims are to lift people out of extreme poverty. So I would say that you should potentially target a geographical area that's got, high levels of deprivation, because I think you can actually see the impacts you have on lives there. So it's important, and I get why they've probably done care workers as the potential pilot, but I absolutely think that, there is a case for a geographical pilot to absolutely tackle those extreme poverties. When you think of the Alaskan model, when they used the money, didn't they, from the oil companies to, and they paid their citizens a UBI. Now, it did absolutely get rid of extreme poverty. It did do that, and it didn't have an effect on the labour supply as well in terms of the work that went on around that, but it also increased fertility. Now, you also know that actually, projections for births in the UK is dropping. In Wales, it's dropping. In Caerphilly, it is dropping. So potentially, there's other impacts, isn't there, that can have that this could lead to a positive outcome in terms of like evidence gathering. So for me, I think, yes, I understand why they've probably gone for a cohort of people, a group of people, but actually I think it should be wider in the community and actually look to go to a geographical area. And we have, certainly some areas in Caerphilly that could be put forward for a pilot scheme, because I think, we have areas that are very deprived, as Dawn has indicated, and Delyth will know, and so will Wayne. Obviously, you've got Upper Rumney in the north of the county, but you've also got somewhere like Lansbury in Caerphilly town. And I think it's important, isn't it, that we tackle this, because some people are in extreme poverty, and we need to lift people out of that extreme poverty. So in terms of the pilot, again, but again, it's gathering that evidence. What impact is it going to have? And I think looking at, just looking at the welfare state and what that brings to us and what it means to us as a nation is important. But effectively is, what can we do? Are we redirecting the welfare state to become this universal basic income? And I think that for me is something that we need to look at, because for me, it's just redirecting that money to the people that need it. And maybe it's a way of simplifying the welfare state, so people are not in that whole process of having to reapply, do this, do that, and feel, sort of compromised by it. So that's my view, Helena.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it is absolutely a UBI Wales calling card of our generation's NHS, and that's certainly what what we think of it. Thank you. Delyth, you grew up in Stradminach?
I did,
yeah. Would you, Hengoed is quite close to there, as quite high on the deprivation list. Would you like to say anything about potentially about this?
Yeah, certainly. And they are so the region I represent in the Senedd is South Wales East, and there are many areas, including parts of Caerphilly, of course, that would really, really, really benefit in so many different ways from a pilot being located there. Obviously, tonight we are making the case very much for Caerphilly, but Dawn was talking earlier about the recent deliberations that have been going on in Westminster about this taking away of the £20 uplift in universal credit, this happening at a time when we are still in the midst of a pandemic. I think that the economy in Caerphilly itself is going to lose something like £8 million because of this. Across the southeast region, 60,290 families, I think, are going to be affected. So the impact of these, let's be frank about it, cruel policies that are kind of dictating the way that benefits are administered and all sorts at the moment, things need to change. And yes, Caerphilly and many parts of Caerphilly would be ideal places to have a geographically based pilot. But building on what I'd said earlier and what the other panelists have been saying as well about the reason why, well, I don't disagree with what Dawn had said, that, you know, that there are definitely cases to be made for having lots of different kinds of pilots, but the benefit you'd get, of course, from having a pilot that is based on geography is that you'd be able to see the intricacies and the unpredictable things about how it would impact on how the community responds, because that's the kind of thing that you can't quite map out without seeing how it's going to work in practice. And again, that means that some things would be lost that you would otherwise get if you were to focus on something else, which the Welsh Government is currently deciding on, which is probably a case for having more than one pilot at different times. And that's something that different people have set out. I think that some of the ways in which it could change a community would be that we would, aside from what we've already been saying about that you wouldn't get people struggling as well, the public health outcomes that could come about because of this, or even mental health indicators, happiness, you know, there's some people that think that that should be actually an indicator that we should be paying a lot more attention to, you know, people's sense of ease of well, you've got a spectrum from ease to joy, and how much people actually are able to get enjoyment out of life because they don't have this constant strain and burden. I mean, these are sometimes dismissed as being quite soft things, but they are the things which make life worth living. And I really don't think that joy and happiness and feeling comfortable in your life should be luxuries that are only there for people who are lucky enough to have a stable income. That, you know, I just think that we need to have, lots of us this evening have been using the word radical. Wayne had said this could be even revolutionary. We need to have this radical or revolutionary reassessment of how society operates in so many different ways, because at the moment you've got so many people who are barely getting by, and they get enough support from the benefit system to just about manage, sometimes not even that. And somehow we've all just been conditioned to accepting that that's the norm. And I know obviously those of us here this evening will not want to accept that that's the norm, but that is kind of, I don't know, it's bizarre that we even have this system where people are essentially punished for being poor. And yeah, we need to have a radical change. Why not have a pilot like this?
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, we're moving on to our last question before the question and answer section from our audience. So if the data from the trial is positive, which we hope it will be, we expect, there'll be a serious case for a basic income to be introduced across Wales. However, how do you expect Wales to achieve that if welfare is not devolved here? Would you advocate for welfare to be devolved? Okay, if we start with our Westminster representative, Wayne, would you like to speak on this?
I'm tempted to say yes, but my head tells me to be extremely careful. And it's a basic fundamental reason. But relatively speaking, Wales is a poor part of the United Kingdom. And I know there are elements inside the Conservative Party who say, look, let's have as much devolutionary as we possibly can. We're sick to death of subsidising the Scots and the north of England and Wales as well. Let's devolve everything. Let them pay it for themselves. And I think that we have to be very, very careful. You know, I believe in transfers of wealth from the rich to the poor. And I think that should be one of the things which holds the United Kingdom together. It doesn't at the moment under the Tories, but it should do. And I would like to see a progressive government ensuring that that happens to a far greater extent than ever it's happened before. So I'm very reluctant to say that welfare should be devolved, but I would like to see more pilots, as I said, of this kind being established. And I would like to see the information which is collated in Wales being transferred to other parts of the United Kingdom. The Scots in particular are clearly interested in this whole concept. But I think there are people inside England as well who are looking for good examples on which they can build. And I think that my aim would be for as much information as possible, making the case as strongly as possible, and it being introduced at a UK level. But I think at the immediate future, the emphasis has got to be on making the case in Wales and carefully examining this pilot project that has been announced with Welsh Government, but having pilot projects again, building on that to make the case even stronger.
Yeah, we think that if the pilot shows everything we want it to do and it raises the wealth across the nation and it's still blocked, you know, and powers, welfare remains devolved. But Delyth, what would you say about this?
Well,
can I just add though? I mean, this isn't a cost-free exercise. You know, one of the strongest arguments against the universal income is that extremely expensive. And I think that I wouldn't want to see the cost of a universal benefit income being introduced in Wales with the bill being solely met by the Welsh people. That would be horrific in my view. Just look at the figures.
So I would certainly be in favour of the devolution of welfare. They are one of the committees in the last Senedd, the committee, the Equalities and Communities and Local Government Housing, one of the mammoth committees that was in the last Senedd, they looked at this and they did recommend that the administration of welfare benefits should be devolved. I think that at the moment, unless there were a government in Westminster, which I'm afraid at the moment is very far off, it seems, unless there were a government in Westminster that either wanted to introduce a universal basic income generally across the UK, or in the absence of the devolution of further powers over welfare, we can only go so far. We are very limited at the moment in the kinds of pilots of UBI that we could implement, because there are some people who've pointed out that if we were to introduce a pilot that was covering people who were already in receipt of some benefits, then because their income had gone up, then the Department of Work and Pensions could decide to claw back that money. So at the moment, we'd need to think creatively in terms of, okay, should we be focusing a pilot on families who are living in poverty but are just above the threshold in order to qualify for some benefits? You know, we've got to think in these in this very staggered way. I think that in order for us to be as radical as we need to be for something like this, then yes, we do need to push for further devolution. At the very least, obviously, one of the big differences between me and the rest of the panel here will be that I would want to go further still. But I do think that when we're talking about the current Westminster government, the abject cruelty that is built into so many of the domestic policies that we are talking about here isn't going to go away. And so I would be in favour of Wales making these decisions for ourselves. Of course, that this is not going to be without a substantial cost, absolutely, which is why for many different reasons, and that's outside the remits of our discussion this evening, but I would want to be radical in yet further ways. I respect that everyone on the panel is not going to agree with me on that. but certainly, to answer the question, I am in favour of further devolution in that.
Thank you. Dawn, if we could turn to you next. What are your thoughts on this matter?
Well, I was actually on that committee that Delyth just referred to. So I was a member of that committee when it made that recommendation that there should be devolution of the administration of benefits. And I think there's a big difference between devolution of benefits and devolution of the administration of benefits. And I certainly favour
definitely
the devolution of the administration of benefits. And as a member of that committee, we visited Scotland to see how they were doing it, and certainly it does give the devolved government certain flexibilities that don't exist when everything is administered centrally from Westminster. But I absolutely agree with Wayne. For us to be taking devolution of benefits without the safety net of the social union, because we benefit from the fact that we are part of a union of 60 million people, and our welfare bill far outstrips anything that people in Wales contribute to the tax system. And we would have to find that somewhere if we devolved the benefit system to Wales and to Wales only. Now, say that's a whole different argument, but certainly the devolution of the administration of benefits does appeal, and I think does provide, as I say, does provide the devolved nations with some flexibility. But that again doesn't come without costs, as the Scots have found. And the Scots found that when they started to administer the devolution and wanted to exercise some flexibility within that, the UK government, of course, allowed them to do that, but said, but you have to pay for it. So it did cost. It cost the Scottish government an awful lot of money to take over the administration of benefits. And they don't have the administration of all benefits in Scotland. There are some that they still don't. The thing that appealed to me was the way in which certain benefits can be assessed if the administration is devolved. That it would be down to us to take a much more humane approach on things like PIP assessments and those kind of issues. So Welsh Government is actually still looking at that and still looking at some of the ways in which that potentially could be done. So that hasn't been ruled out, but as we said, it doesn't come without cost. This pilot won't come without cost, because there's no input from the UK government into this pilot. And so if we move from a pilot to a permanent arrangement, then we've got to be able to know how we're going to pay for that. Because as Delyth has already said, and she's quite right, there is no doubt in my mind that if we introduced a universal basic income, the UK government would immediately claw back any benefits that people in that cohort were getting, and then we would end up having to pay the benefits plus the top up for universal basic income, and that wouldn't be affordable. So there is an awful lot more to this. So it's on the one hand, there is the principle that I think all of us here are signed up to, that we and the reasons why we are signed up to it, but there are also practical applications that we can't run away from and just pretend that because we think it's a great idea and because we know it's the right thing to do, that we can do it, because we still have to be able to pay for it. And as I say, our colleagues in Scotland have struggled with that, and Scotland benefit far more than Wales does on the current Barnett formula settlement or devolution settlement. So and even they struggle with it. I mean, if we had anything like the settlement that Scotland had, my goodness me, we could do so much more.
Thank you, Dawn. Philippa, if I could bring you in on this one as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I think nearly everyone else has touched on that, and I agree with the sentiment from Dawn there in terms of the devolution of the administrative element of the welfare state. I think that's important, but I think for me it's understanding, isn't it, that actually what we need to see the welfare state. We need to see a campaign and an agenda that absolutely increases trade union and makes them much more stronger in the workplace, so that employment rights improve, and actually so that people are actually in decent, secure employment. I think we're forgetting that actually there's a big cohort that need those things too. And I think so to me, an evolution, should we say, in the welfare state, plus those other things, they all need to go in tandem, so that the actual, I'd say, the social security system, which, as we know, has been undervalued, is being underfunded for 11 years, shall we say. And I think for me, understanding that we need you know, employers to pay the real living wage. We need the welfare payments, and actually that are not, you know, so you don't have to apply and it's punitive, and all the things that we see with universal basic income, universal payments, where we actually see the sanctions as well that are happening to people for absolutely, well, you know, I don't even want to go there because it, you know, for some really trivial reasons. So for me, it's taken away that element. And I know someone in the chat has talked about the poverty, we're talking about that, but actually, you know, it's understanding that, you know, we need to raise everyone up. We need to raise everyone up so they feel valued in society, don't we? And that's the aim, I think, really here. But, you know, when you see that, you know, things have been frozen for such a long time, they are going to argue that the cost is going to be high, but that's because everything's been underfunded for so long and money has been channeled in different directions. So I think it's also important that we, you know, we look at, you know, the stigmatization of claimants. I think that's something that was referred to as well. I think that, you know, actually we can value the happiness and well-being and the mental health of people. And actually, you look at the budget in the NHS, if people were fitter, feeling better from a mental and physical perspective, actually, you wouldn't have to spend as much money in the NHS and funding that, because actually you're just redirecting the money, aren't you, through the bigger lens of the welfare state and what it stands for us as a nation. So I've really gone around the houses there, but I'm getting a bit irate now in terms of, you know, what we need to understand in terms of, you know, what our values are, what we need to stand for, what we need to invest in. I get the hesitancy from Wayne there in terms of, we don't know the cost, do we? We don't, and we need to understand that a pilot needs to be done, the evidence needs to be provided, and then you need to look at making a rational decision. But we also need the cooperation of the UK government to let that happen. We need the cooperation of them here in Wales in order to deliver that. So, you know, it needs to be talked about, it needs to be debated at every level, you know, and I know obviously in the Senate they have, but in Parliament they need to debate that. But I think we all need to debate it everywhere, to be honest. And I think people need to start talking about this, because I think it could be a fundamental change in the way we view things. We need to give people a purpose in life and actually not feeling like, when am I going to get that, you know, that last £1.50 to buy that loaf of bread that we desperately need at the end of the week. We can't have that. Sure. But we also need people to feel part of society and feel happy in their lives, as has already been said. And, you know, and I think that if you're striving for that, that is really, really important. We all need to aspire to that, to be happy, to be able to have enough money to buy the things we need in life and a little bit more, so that, you know, you're not constantly looking for that £1.50 for that loaf of bread at the end of the week. You know, I'm keeping it all very simple, I'm afraid, but that's kind of, but it's about the UK government absolutely working with us.
Yeah. Can I just come in quickly there? So I know we're short of time, but just really quickly, I absolutely agree with that. And I know, and those concepts that that you said, that it's simple, yeah, but they're the fundamentals. And when we're talking about, okay, that it's not just the being able to buy, like, oh gosh, the loaf of bread, things like that. It's also just things that are thought of as treats. Everyone should be able to have those things as well. And I think that we're all, the way that so many elements of the press, not everyone in the press, but so many elements of the press, you know, the horrible tabloid headlines about benefit scroungers and these awful things like that, they make out that people don't deserve to have nice things. Everyone should be able to have them, and that shouldn't be a radical thing to even be saying. But no, sorry, I don't interrupt. I agree.
No, dare I say, that's a very important point both of you are making, really, and that's what's revolutionary about it. Because if you take what the government is saying at the UK level now, they're saying benefits must be kept and must be kept to the absolute minimum, because that's the incentive for people to get up off their backsides and find work. Now that creates security, creates horrific problems which we all see in our communities. And what this concept of a universal basic income means is turning that on its head and saying people perform their best and achieve their full potential and contribute more to society when they have a basic security. And that's what it's all about.
Can I also just add one other thing, Helena? I think it's very briefly. I think it's just about saying that when we're going to pursue radical ideas like a universal basic income, this shouldn't be seen as just a knee-jerk reaction to a far-right reactionary UK government. This should be something that we are saying, because, you know, we shouldn't be developing policies based on who happens to sit in number 10 at any one given point in time. Because, you know, within a couple of years' time, it could be somebody different. This is about looking at something that changes the way in which we deal with people's income fundamentally across the UK, regardless of who's sitting in number 10. It's about changing direction and changing a different way, having a different way of dealing with people's income.
And can I just come back in one more time?
Yeah,
Helena, sorry. I will get off my box in a minute, but I think what's important, I didn't mean to keep emphasising about the £1.50 loaf of bread. You know, it's being able to buy. I didn't really mean it in that way. I meant, you know, the fact that there are cohorts that struggle to do that, but also you're absolutely right, to be able to go on a day trip, to be able to go and have swimming lessons, to be, you know, to be able to take part in a gym club, or, you know, the things that, you know, are really important to children's lives in the sense of developing, you know, that awareness, being part of society. You know, it's all those things that, you know, absolutely you only, you know, or to be able to buy another book for you, you know, all those things. It's so important, isn't it? And having access. Sorry, go on now.
No, I agree with everything you've said again this evening. So, okay, we are going to briefly move on to a quick fire now, question and answer session. Otherwise, we're not going to have time for any final remarks. So, if we get straight into it, okay. So we have Jackie from Charlotte, I think. Why are we focusing on calling it a poverty payment? Can the panel explain why this focus on it as a poverty payment rather than on something a bit more aspirational?
Well, I don't think I refer to it as a poverty payment, but I do recognise that I have a lot of people in my constituency in poverty, and UBI would bring them out of poverty. So I don't think that's anything we can escape from. What a different system of universal basic income would lead to is taking people out of poverty. So we can't run away from that. That is an aspiration, and that is an objective. It's one of the reasons why I came into politics, is to find a way of getting people out of poverty. So I wouldn't apologise for that, even though I didn't use that terminology. I think it is a tool in the toolbox to eradicate poverty once and for all.
I'm sorry, Jackie was from Charlton, not Charlotte. Excuse me there.
All the way from the US of A.
You know, but I suppose it's more about equality, isn't it? It's about equality, and that, you know, you're levelling up. You know, and I don't want to use the levelling. I don't want to use the expression levelling up because, you know, sorry. Anyway, but, you know, but it is absolutely, surely it's about equality, isn't it? And what we all strive for is to have a more equal society where you've got access to things, you know, on an equal basis. So, you know, that you shouldn't, just because, you know, not everyone can have a £70,000 a year job, can they? Not everyone can. You know, most people are in incomes probably between 25 to 30,000. That's probably the average in Wales. Maybe, I don't know, someone can correct me if I've got that horrifically wrong. But, you know, even with the high cost of living, you may not be able to do an awful lot if you're the main breadwinner on that salary. So, so it's understanding that actually, again, that basic income can just lift you, can't it? It can just take you where you can actually do those things in life that are important.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Wayne, if we could just comment from you regarding, we've talked about it being sensible to have a number of UBI pilots, but what if we could do all that with a geographical one, with the range of people in an area, the wealthy, the less wealthy, and so on? What do you think about that?
I think it'd be good. Yes, I mean, the more information we get, the better, and I believe the more the case will be made. But there's one crucial thing, however, and that much depends on what the level of basic income is set at.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's not inconceivable, but if you had a right-wing government who accepted it as a basic income, it'd be derisory low. So I think that the size of the income is extremely important. But I think we shouldn't primarily see it as a payment merely to get people out of poverty. you know, this is an instrument really, which I believe would weld society together and create a new confidence amongst all people that they've got that basic bedrock there so that they can fulfill their potential and reduce the stresses and strains of modern life. And it's a new way of approaching society. And that's what I think is the really powerful message about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really well said. Okay, let's have a look. So we've got a question from Shane about building a grassroots effort to try and educate people with flyers, etc. Are there any grassroots efforts in order to sort of promote this concept on the streets? What do you think would really work? Anybody want to come in on this? Grassroots?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that, I mean, what needs to happen is that in order to get the communal benefits from this, we need to get more of a sense, like Wayne was just saying, we need to get more sense of a community to get behind this idea. And I think that it links into Jackie's question earlier, actually, about the idea that the way that it's framed is going to be really important to how much buy-in there is publicly about this idea that, you know, that yes, I mean, fundamentally, we should be challenging the stigmatization of poverty, and that's a whole wider conversation, and we shouldn't ignore that at all. This needs to be part of it. But the way it can also be framed in terms of getting the buy-in of key groups like entrepreneurs, like young people as they're about to leave school, like well, actually, I think the Future Generations Commissioner has made an argument that there could be a pilot for the arts sector. So I think that it could be framed in different ways, and we could make the case in lots of, but I think that, sorry, I know it's just quick fire. Basically, yes, framing it and making sure that it isn't just about challenging people's preconceptions. Right, I'll leave it there, sorry.
Absolutely brilliant, thank you. I'm going to aim the final question before our final remarks at Philippa. This is about Caerphilly Council, and how would you feel about a motion supporting towards UBI? We know we've had one in some of the other Welsh labs, and Caerphilly Lab also pushing for one. How would you feel in respect of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we need, again, is what's been referred to already. We need the evidence from the pilot, don't we? But you know, the principle of a UBI, I have no problem with at all. I hope that's come across tonight. Yes, it's something we can look at in a quick answer, and I don't give quick answers very often.
Okay, that's lovely. Thank you so much. How about some closing remarks from you all? If we start with Dawn, would you like to kick us off?
Okay, thank you. Well, I just think this is such a really important debate. It's it's of its time. It's of its time. It's, we haven't seen any kind of change to the welfare state in a couple of generations. And although we've had this discussion about this isn't about poverty, it is about levelling up. It's about whatever we want to call it, but it is also about replacing the welfare state with because the welfare state in a sense was the safety net. So the new universal basic income would be the safety net below which nobody below which nobody falls. And I think that, that its time has come. Its time has come. I mean, one of the things I would also say is, I'm very taken with the idea, and I know Plaid Cymru have got a debate on it, and I know my colleague Jack Sargent MS is also running with the idea of debating a 4-day week and whether we should look at piloting a 4-day week. I think that's something that we could throw into the mix as well. Again, people have said 4-day week, people are just as productive, if not more so, by working 4 days instead of 5. I know my son has done it because he's quite a new dad, so he's reduced his working days from 5 to 4. He still works the same number of hours, but he works over 4 days instead of 5. So all these kind of things, these radical new ideas about how we change the way that we see society being run, and it is, as I say, I think its time has come.
That's lovely. Thank you so much. Philippa.
Yeah, I think Yeah, I suppose just on that, you know, in terms of being radical, I think, you know, sometimes you need that, don't you? You need a reform, you need to refocus, you need to, you know, it's evolution as well, isn't it, to do the right thing for people. Again, it was always developed, and I'm still going through a very thick book about, you know, the welfare state. It's about that big, a very thick book but it's really interesting in terms of this ethos and where it came from and everything linked to that. But I think for me, I agree with Dawn on the 4 days a week. I think that should be piloted, and I think, you know, I know many other nations have done that. But, you know, it could be done in tandem with the UBI pilot and the 4-day, because I think, again, that would give people, wouldn't it, the right balance of the work and life, so that actually you can enjoy your outdoors, you can enjoy life with your family and what have you. And I think, and take up activities and hobbies, which, you know, they help you, don't they, in your well-being. They absolutely do make you a more rounded person, because you're able to, you know, engage in different activities outside of the workplace, you know. So it's really important, I think, that we do look at this and value what people need to do. So I'd say, yeah, UBI pilot and 4-day week pilot as well. Yeah, I'm all for that.
Lovely, thank you. Bella, please.
And we are living at the moment in one of these very few windows of opportunity when actually it's possible to be radical, because the past 18 months have forced us to kind of reassess so many different things. And it's great that we're having discussions like this, but let's not let the window close, because there are going to be so many forces that will want things to go back as they were before, and we should just push for things to be even more radical. And I think that this is an opportunity to reassess really, really radically. Again, radical is the word of the night, isn't it? Radically reassess the way that society operates, but also what it's for. That actually society, you know, there is such a thing as society, and it's very much to support people, to enable people to flourish, and for people to be contented and happy. Let's be radical in pushing for things that allow people to have that happiness and to have that sense of fulfillment in life. And yeah, when we talk about the safety net, let's make it so that it's that we don't need to have a safety net any longer. I can't think of what the equivalent metaphor would be instead, but rather like that there doesn't have to be a net at all, that we're looking at a way of not just pulling people up, but that there's a baseline which is actually it needs to be high, not just a baseline of, okay, people can manage, but no, people can flourish.
The floor to capitalism, possibly, yeah. Wayne, please, will you?
Thank you. I mean, dare I say, what we need is an empowering framework. And I think that the basic income can help to provide that for all people in society. I think it's worth remembering that much of this debate has really started because of the experience of a pandemic over the last 18 months, where many people found themselves excluded from all kinds of support being provided by the state. And people were saying, well, shouldn't everybody have the same basic income? And I think that has really promoted the concept at a relatively high level, really, and it is picked up on the radical thinking of Mark Drakeford and others over quite a long period of time. And I think the important thing now is that we don't lose the momentum, and that support for this is promoted and discussed and debated by a whole range of different avenues. And I think that tonight's discussion has been, you know, a powerful stimulus to that process. But I think what we all need to commit ourselves to make sure that this process continues. And I hope very much that it'll come to fruition in a not too distant future.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed this evening so much. I just want to say thank you to our guests for taking the time this evening to be part of this conversation. I really hope that everyone watching it, either live or on the recording, has also found it really interesting and as enjoyable as I have. I want to say thank you also again to the UBI Lab Network for the assistance in putting on this event, and a call to action. Because if anyone is feeling generous or able to support them in supporting us, the UBI Volunteer Labs, in promoting UBI, then the links again will be in the chat box. And for anyone who wants to get involved in help making UBI a reality, please join your local lab, join a lab where you have an interest, a special interest in, please get in touch. And if you live, like I said, elsewhere in Wales and you're interested in founding a lab, then please get in touch with us. I want to mention again the Senedd petition regarding the Care Leavers Plus. We'd really love it if you could sign that. And just keep an eye out on Twitter. Get involved, like, share, comment, help get the UBI message out, because it is for all of us. All right then. Thank you so much. This has been just really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coyle.
Bye all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers.
Brilliant.
It's been wonderful. We'll be in touch, Philippa.
Thank you, Dad. Wow, that was really good.
That's really brilliant. I enjoyed that so much.
You want to stop the live stream and the recording